The heavy pulse of the Aegis shell's airlock was the only sound against the screaming Boreas wind. Silas held his breath, his gloved hand hovering over the manual release as the blue-skinned woman collapsed against his chest, her skin radiating a terrifying, unnatural heat. Through the frost-rimed visor of her helmet, her golden eyes didn't just look at him, they pleaded. If he pulled the lever, he was committing a crime against every protocol the Federation had ever written. Would you risk everything you have to save someone the rest of the galaxy doesn't even want to exist? Subscribe to follow Silas and Alara's journey through the frozen dark of Boreas Prime. 3 years ago, the only thing Silas had to worry about was the persistent rattle of the station's hydroponic fans. He'd come to this ice-choked rock to vanish, trading the ghost of Lyra for the numbing comfort of a maintenance schedule that never changed. The wind outside didn't just howl. It gnawed at the thermal plating of the shell. Silas sat at his workbench, staring at a blank terminal plate, a smooth, dusty rectangle of polymer that was supposed to hold the technician's log. For over 1,000 days he hadn't typed a single word. What was there to say? The ice stayed frozen. The rations stayed bland. The silence stayed heavy, which meant the motion sensors were definitely malfunctioning. He watched the monitors flicker. A jagged red line cut through the static, indicating a heat signature in Sector 4. Impossible. Nothing survived the peak of a Boreas storm cycle. But the ping returned, rhythmic and desperate. Silas felt a ghost of a sensation in his chest, a sharp twitch of long-buried instinct. He checked the external feed, and for a second the blizzard parted. A figure was there, stumbling, draped in silver rags that whipped like broken wings. And then it fell. Silas didn't think about the isolation laws. He didn't think about the fact that his oxygen scrubbers were already at 60% capacity. He simply grabbed his thermal rig and stepped into the whiteout. The cold hit him like a physical blow, a wall of crystalline needles that sought every seam in his suit. He tracked the signal through the blinding haze until he saw a splash of impossible color against the gray. Silas stood over the half-buried figure in the snow, watching a single, claw-like hand twitch against the frozen white before the blue-skinned woman's golden eyes flickered open with a final, desperate plea for life. He dragged her through the airlock, the metal groaning under the pressure. Inside the staging area, the heat lamps hissed to life, reflecting off her cerulean skin. She wasn't human. She wasn't even one of the known protected species. Her features were sharp, feline, and currently grayed by hypothermia. Silas reached for the comms console to alert Central Command, his finger hovering over the emergency broadcast. But he stopped. If he reported this, the first contact protocols would bring a legion of science vessels and containment teams to his door. They would take her. They would dissect the mystery of her arrival until there was nothing left but a report. He looked back at her, seeing the way her fingers curled into the floor plating, seeking purchase in a world that wanted her dead. He didn't make the call. Instead, he fetched a thermal blanket and a nutrient drip, choosing a different kind of survival. The warmth of the Aegis shell felt different with another heartbeat inside it. For days, Silas watched the woman through the reinforced glass of the medbay, her recovery a slow climb out of a frozen abyss. She moved with a liquid grace that suggested she was built for environments far more forgiving than Boreas Prime. When she finally spoke, it wasn't through her throat. She had found a damaged synapse core in his scrap heap, a piece of high-tier tech he'd never been able to bridge. To her, it was a toy. She sat on the floor, wires snaking from the device to the ports behind her ears. Her eyes glazed as the station's linguistic database poured into her mind. Silas, she said, the word rough and new. Her name was Alara. She wasn't an explorer. She was a unit, an observer designed by a collective light years away to record data and eventually be recycled once her storage was full. She had fled her own deletion, a piece of equipment that had committed the sin of developing a soul. The piece was shattered by a low-frequency hum that vibrated through the floorboards. Silas didn't need the sensors to tell him what it was. A scouting drone, sleek and jagged, was descending through the atmosphere. Her people weren't coming to rescue her. They were coming to reclaim their property. They had to move. The air was thin and bit like a serrated knife as they crested the ridge toward the distant relay station. Silas carried the heavy decoy packs, his lungs burning, while Alara moved beside him, her golden eyes scanning the skies for the glint of pursuit, which meant they were out of time. The drone swept over the relay, its red scanning beam cutting through the snow like a laser. Silas and Alara crouched in the shadow of a frozen boulder, their shoulders touching. For the first time in 3 years, Silas didn't feel the crushing weight of his isolation. He felt the heat of her skin, the shared rhythm of their panicked breathing. The Aegis shell's airlock pulse was the only sound against the screaming Boreas wind as they slipped back inside, the decoy at the relay having successfully drawn the drone's attention away. Silas held his breath, his gloved hand hovering over the manual release, as Alara leaned her forehead against his. The outcome was clear. They wouldn't be found today. But the search would continue. He didn't pull the lever to signal the Federation. Instead, he locked the door from the inside. He picked up the blank polymer terminal plate, the one that had sat dusty and empty for 3 years. With a steady hand, he didn't write a log or a report. He took a stylus and etched 2 names into the plastic, Silas and Alara. The plate wasn't a piece of equipment anymore. It was a foundation. How far would you go to protect the family you found in the middle of a wasteland? If Alara was a unit marked for deletion, what does that make us when we choose to stop running?